Whatever happened to the element of surprise? Right? The element of surprise. What a group of losers we have.
Somebody should run against John McCain, who has been, in my opinion, not so hot. And I supported him. I supported him for president. I raised $1 million for him. It's a lot of money. I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that, because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
We have a bunch of babies running our country, folks. We have a bunch of losers. They're losers. They're babies.
A loser.
What a loser! What a loser!
I don't like losers.
Evil losers. Losers.
Loser. They're losers. They're just losers.
He's the greatest loser I've ever seen.
Been a loser for many years. Been a loser for a long time.
Have them change the name to the Losers Project. A group of major losers. They're Republican losers. McMahon's a stone-cold loser. The Losers Project.
A loser, like you guy's a stone-cold loser, has been all his life. Frankly, losers.
Loser.
It's a word Donald Trump isn't usually at a loss for.
We have losers. We have losers.
Sometimes the loser is generic, but usually the loser has a name.
Well, Rosie's a loser. She's always been a loser.
Trump is always tweeting the L word. His targets range from websites. The Huffington Post is such a loser to pundits.
When I watch a George Will or a Charles Krauthammer, I watch them for years. They're losers. They're just losers.
He even called a Miss USA contestant a disgruntled loser after she called his beauty contest rigged.
She suffers from a thing called loser's remorse. She lost.
And she did lose the lawsuit he later filed. In Donald Trump's world, there seem to be varying degrees of loserdom. He's called fellow Republican Karl Rove a loser, a proven loser, and a total loser, while actor Russell Brand was a major loser, to which Brand responded, "Are you drunk when you write these tweets?" As for Cher, bang, bang, he shot her down.
And Cher is somewhat of a loser. She's lonely. She's unhappy.
When he's feeling happy, he tweets to everyone, including all haters and losers, Happy New Year. When asked about his name-calling,
using terms like dummy, loser, total losers, is that something you would continue doing if you were president?
Oh, I don't think. Look, when people attack me, I, let them have it back.
Trump quoted his own book, "Show me someone without an ego and I'll show you a loser." But compared to Ace Ventura,
loser! Let's go, Ace. Loser.
Trump's delivery is low-key.
Le who? The her.
Jon Stewart wondered what Trump would say about our founding fathers.
John Hancock, he's a loser. Hey, what kind of a loser needs to put his name in giant letters on everything? Hey, what?
Jeannie Mo, CNN.
Rosie is a loser.
New York.
One of Washington's most bizarre feuds now coming to a boil. President Trump today blasting George Conway, husband of his senior advisor Kellyanne Conway, as a total loser.
I didn't serve. I haven't served. I had a foot thing, and I had deferment for that.
Mr. Trump said, "You think I'm stupid? I'm not going to Vietnam."
Let's take John McCain. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
I always wanted to get the Purple Heart. This was much easier.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me.
The president called former Defense Secretary James Mattis the most overrated general.
Russian intelligence officers offered to pay the Taliban to kill American troops.
President Trump was told about this in March, and he has done nothing.
The president called U.S. service members buried in France losers and suckers.
His visit was scrubbed because the president feared the rain would ruin his hair.
When Senator John McCain died, the president told his senior staff, "We're not going to support that loser's funeral."
We keep people accountable for the way they treat our veterans, and if they don't treat them well, we say, sorry, you're fired, get out.
It has been a rough period for President Trump and military leaders, with his former defense secretary, retired Marine General James Mattis, assailing him for dividing the country, a sentiment given an amen by Trump's former chief of staff, retired Marine General John Kelly, not to mention criticisms from General Colin Powell, Admiral Bill McRaven, General Martin Dempsey, General John Allen, Admiral Mike Mullen. The president and his supporters have had plenty of nasty things to say about these men who have served our country, of course. No need for me to report them. You all have access to Twitter. There is one group of generals, however, that the president is standing firm with. Dead, racist losers. More specifically, the Confederate commanders, after whom 10 Army bases are currently named. Days ago, the Pentagon said that they wanted to begin a bipartisan conversation about renaming these 10 bases, but the president shut that down. He wants to continue to honor them. He wants to continue to honor, for example, John Brown Gordon, the namesake of Fort Gordon in Georgia. Major General Gordon is believed to have headed the Georgia Ku Klux Klan, essentially in that era, a terrorist organization. The president wants to continue to honor General Henry Benning, who was, in the words of General David Petraeus, quote, such an enthusiast for slavery that as early as 1849 he argued for the dissolution of the Union and the formation of a Southern slaveocracy, unquote. He wants to continue to honor Braxton Bragg, a slave owner who resigned ignominiously after losing the Battle of Chattanooga. And on, you get the point. Men who declared war upon the United States to fight for their right to own and rape and kill black Americans. Now, the White House cannot defend the fact that a U.S. military base is named after someone believed to have headed the Georgia Klan. So instead, they talk about how we won 2 world wars with soldiers trained on those 10 bases. 4 of these forts were named in the 19-teens. 6 of them were named in the 1940s. These bases were not named after the Civil War as an attempt at national reconciliation. They were named in the 20th century as a way of honoring the racist lost cause that the generals fought. The key word in that phrase, lost. They lost, and rightfully so. Their cause was immoral. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, arguing that the bases should not be renamed, asked hypothetically this week, where does it end? Do we take away honors to George Washington or Thomas Jefferson? And that's a fine question, and I don't have an answer. Washington and Jefferson had slaves, though their careers were not built on fighting for the right to own slaves. In other words, they're honored despite the hideous parts of their histories, not because of the hideous parts of their histories. But before we talk about where this all ends, it does not take much moral clarity to understand that a good place to start would be for the United States to stop honoring traitors and terrorists.
President Trump doubted U.S. intelligence that Russia may have offered bounties to the Taliban to kill U.S. soldiers.
Today, President Trump's first comment claiming he was totally in the dark. Nobody briefed or told me about the so-called attacks on our troops in Afghanistan by Russians.
I think it's another Russia hoax. This didn't rise to the occasion. I think it's a hoax. I think it's a hoax by the newspapers and the Democrats.
She spoke to the president on speakerphone, surrounded by family and her congresswoman. The president told the fallen soldier's widow that her husband, quote, knew what he signed up for, but I guess it still hurts.
I had a very nice conversation with the woman.
This is a grieving widow. And when she actually hung up the phone, she looked at me and said, he didn't even know his name.
I did not say what she said.
She was crying. She broke down.
I always wanted to get the Purple Heart. This was much easier.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
When Mary Trump's book came out about her uncle, the president, a few weeks ago, you remember that book. It became an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. It sold like a gazillion copies even before it came out. And the book is a fairly terrifying up-close look at the president from the perspective of someone in his family who has known him since she was a little kid. And there was a lot in the book that was honestly sort of more flesh on the bones of stuff that we already had an inkling of when it comes to this president. Mary Trump provided new detail, for example, about alleged financial crimes by the president and tax fraud by the president. New detail about racist and sexist stuff from him. New detail about displays of cruelty from him over the course of his life. I mean, the book was full of alarming information. That's why it sold so widely. But I'll tell you, I'm reading it. What I felt reading it is that a lot of the worst stuff in the book, frankly, it did sort of fit the general contours of what we'd already come to learn about the president over his time in public life. It gave us more detail. It gave us further anecdotes that bolstered what we might have already known for a lot of the big stuff. That said, there were a few things in Mary Trump's book that stood out as absolutely new. And at least when I read the book for the first time, just disconnected from anything I had previously known about him, including this passage I want to share with you, a short passage from chapter 11 of Mary Trump's book. It's a scene where Mary and her brother, Fritz, are talking with their Uncle Robert. Their Uncle Robert is the president's brother who just recently died. And in this scene in the book, Mary and Fritz are talking with their Uncle Robert about money, about the money in the family. The president's father, the profoundly rich Fred Trump Sr., Mary and Fritz's grandfather, had just died, and Mary and her brother had learned that they were being basically cut out of the will, and they're having a conversation about it. And this is how Mary Trump relays that conversation. Quote, "At our first meeting, when we asked our Uncle Robert to explain why my grandfather had done what he had, he said, 'Listen, your grandfather didn't give a bleep about you. And not just you, he didn't give a bleep about any of his grandchildren. We're being treated worse because our father died,' I said." This is in Mary's voice. That's Mary talking. She says, quote, "When we pointed out that our cousins, who were also grandchildren of Fred, they would still benefit from the money their parents were getting, Uncle Robert said any of them could be disowned at any time. Donnie," meaning Donald Trump Jr., "was going to join the army or some bull bleep like that. And Donald and Ivana told him if he did, they would disown him in a second." That's from chapter 11 of Mary Trump's recent book about her uncle, the president. She says there was family discussion on this matter, that President Trump told his son, Don Jr., that he would be disowned from the Trump family if he committed the grave sin of enlisting in the U.S. military. And like I said, a lot in Mary Trump's book sort of fit the contours of what we already knew or suspected about this president and what he's like, but that did not. That stood out as a whole new idea, and I asked Mary Trump about it, and I'm about to show you a portion of my interview with Mary Trump on that subject that has never aired before. Watch. In terms of what Americans should take from this, I feel like you've defined some things in his upbringing that are psychologically interesting in terms of us figuring out who he is. And why he might think the way that he did. But there's also some things that you describe that I think he would see as contrary to the public image that he has created. For example, there is an anecdote that you share in the book where you say that your cousin Donnie, Donald Trump Jr., had apparently at one point planned to or said he might enlist in the Army. And it was relayed to you that your uncle, the president, had told him that he would be disinherited if he enlisted?
Yeah, my Uncle Robert told me that story.
Do you think it's true, or did you ever have any corroboration of it?
I've had no corroboration, but I believe it. There was literally no reason for him to make such a thing up. It's a pretty specific thing to lie about.
It's striking because your father has made a big deal out of the fact that he went to a military-themed boarding school. And you write about that decision within the family that he should go off to that school to sort of give him some discipline at some point, and it seems to have not really worked. But he has built that up as a sign of his respect for the military, his purported respect for the military. So the idea that he would go to a military-themed school and that would be a source of pride, but his son wanting to join the actual military would be a source of shame and would be something that should be punished. That's just quite a disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, my uncle, not my dad. Yes, it is. There is a great disconnect. No problem. There's a real disconnect there. And then, you know, Donald's later doing everything in his power, and my grandfather's doing everything in his power to make sure that Donald did not have to serve. So I'm not entirely sure I know how to explain it.
I'm not entirely sure I know how to explain it, she says. what she's referring to there in terms of doing everything in their power to make sure that Donald didn't have to serve, that I think is a reference to the multiple deferments that President Trump got during the Vietnam era for supposedly having bone spurs in his feet, even though those didn't seem to bother any other aspect of his life, including his active athletic career. But Mary Trump, that's her talking about this anecdote that she discloses in her recent book, where she says it was discussed openly in her family that her uncle, President Trump, wouldn't allow his son to join the military upon pain of being disowned. And that, to me, reading Mary Trump's book was new, which is why I asked her about it. I did screw up in the way I asked her the question. I described the president's behavior as if that was her father. The president is obviously her uncle, not her father, so she had to correct me there. But that anecdote has kind of stuck with me because it seems strange. And I have since realized that it tracks with something else that's been reported from the president's life, something reported last summer by Gabriel Sherman at Vanity Fair. He reported that a source had passed to him what appears to be a copy of the president's prenup, a prenuptial agreement he signed with one of his wives, Marla Maples, before he agreed to marry her. This was after his first marriage to Ivana Trump, with whom he had Don Jr. and Eric and Ivanka. Before he married his second wife, Marla Maples, though, she had already given birth to their child, their daughter, Tiffany. And I know, who cares? Like, I even hate talking about this stuff. But what is relevant here is that baby Tiffany was already on the scene when the president signed this prenuptial agreement with Marla Maples about what the financial settlement would be between them if their marriage didn't work out. And now, in retrospect, there is a part of that that stands out as well, like the rocket's red glare. This is from Gabe Sherman's reporting last summer. Quote, "More than anything, the prenup shows how fiercely Trump wanted to protect the money he did have. Marla Maples reportedly wanted $25 million if the marriage failed, but Trump agreed to pay her only $1 million if they separated within 5 years, plus another $1 million to buy a house. The agreement also states that Trump's $100,000 child support payments for Tiffany would cease if Tiffany got a full-time job or enlisted in the military." Ms. Maples agreed to these terms with the hope that Trump would renegotiate a better deal in 5 years. He reportedly signed a legal document that would end child support payments to his youngest daughter, specifically if she joined the military. And per Mary Trump's book that came out this summer, that tracks pretty perfectly with family discussion over him threatening to disown his oldest son if he joined the military as well. And that history, of course, is, you know, uncomfortable alongside the president's constant efforts to associate himself with the military and wanting military parades held in his honor and all the rest of it. But it's also just a little bit strange, right? Just as a human thing to do. I mean, parents, of course, worry about the safety of their son or daughter. If their son or daughter is going to sign up for the military and might end up going off to war, we all understand that. On the whole, are immensely proud of their sons and their daughters who serve. My dad's a vet. I'm hugely proud of him. My cousins are vets. I'm hugely proud of them and thankful for their service. Threatening your kids that they'll be cut off and no longer your kid if they enlist? It's just not a normal thing. I mean, especially for somebody who's so loud now and proclaiming how much he loves the military more than anybody else in the whole country. Well, now, tonight, the yuck factor here has come into pretty gross focus with a just jaw-dropping new piece by reporter Jeffrey Goldberg that is just published at The Atlantic. And it's something that, it's not gory, but it will turn your stomach. And it really does put the focus on something odd and curdled and wrong at the center of this. You see the headline here. Trump says Americans who died in war are losers and suckers.
Trump is a idiot.
Winners aren't losers, by Donald J. Trump. Winners aren't losers. They're winners, like me. A loser's a loser. Which one will you be? Good. Winners do deals and winners get rich, while sad little losers just sit there and bitch.
Could be a big seller.
My daughter loves it. The dog is a loser, and frankly, I pity it. This dog did bad deals. This dog is an idiot. And poor Mr. Bear, he must feel like a loser, valeting that 2006 PT Cruiser. This lobster's a loser. Throw him in the pot. I like a lobster who doesn't get caught. Those losers are failures who get nothing done. Just do what I do and you'll be number one. Now, here are some frogs I do not like at all. We must kick these frogs out and then build a wall. Oh, the places you'll go on your yacht, on your plane, with your suits from Milan and your wives from Ukraine. Oh, the buildings you'll build, oh, the wealth you'll amass, oh, the people around you all kissing your ass. There are two kinds of people. Which one will you be? A loser like them? Would you like to finish? Or a winner?
Like me.
Oh, so much. Except for Donald Trump's a piece of shit. Peace out, love you!